There are names in Dungeons & Dragons that carry weight. Strahd von Zarevich, Tiamat, Lolth, Asmodeus. These names make experienced players nervous, make dungeon masters smile knowingly, and make characters pray to whatever gods will listen. But there's one name, one whispered, cursed, feared name that stands above them all. A name that literally changed D&D forever. A name so powerful that merely speaking it in some campaigns is considered a death wish. Vecna. Once a mortal man, then a lich, then a demigod, then something even the gods fear. Vecna is not just another villain. He's the villain who's become so powerful, so dangerous, so perfectly evil that he ascended beyond mortality, beyond death, beyond even divine status to become a fundamental force in the multiverse. His disembodied hand and eye are legendary artifacts that corrupt anyone foolish enough to use them. His name has been referenced in multiple D&D editions spanning nearly 5 decades. He's inspired countless adventures, been the final boss of world-ending campaigns, and even made a mainstream cultural appearance as the villain of Stranger Things Season 4, though that version barely scratches the surface of what Vecna truly is. This is the story of the Whispered One, the Undying King, the master of all secrets, the Arch-Lich who looked at godhood and decided even that wasn't enough. This is the complete chronicle of Vecna, the most dangerous villain in D&D history. Vecna's story begins in the Greyhawk campaign setting, in an age so ancient that most historical records have crumbled to dust. He was born into the Flan people, one of the first human civilizations on the world of Earth, in the city of Fleeth to a woman named Mazel, who belonged to the lowest, untouchable caste. His mother was a hedge witch who practiced the forbidden arts, teaching young Vecna the fundamentals of magic in secret. She passed on to him not just spells and rituals, but a worldview that power was the only thing that mattered, that the strong made the rules, and that magic was the great equalizer that could elevate even those born to nothing. The authorities of Fleeth eventually discovered Mazel's practice of forbidden necromancy. She was executed, burned at the stake according to some accounts, exiled to die in the wastes according to others. The exact method matters less than the result. Vecna's mother was killed by those in power for daring to practice magic, for trying to rise above her station, for refusing to accept the limitations placed on her by birth. Young Vecna swore revenge, not the hot, immediate vengeance of youth that burns bright and fades, but cold, patient, absolute revenge. He would not merely kill those responsible. He would become so powerful that no authority could ever threaten him again. He would transcend the very concept of mortality that had claimed his mother. From childhood, Vecna was different. Not blessed, but cursed with genius. He possessed an intellect that burned too bright, a mind that grasped magical principles that should have been beyond mortal comprehension. After his mother's execution, he was bound into servitude by the very order of wizards who had condemned her, forced to work as a bootblack, then a scribe, menial positions meant to humble him. But humility was not in Vecna's nature. Where other children in his position would have accepted their fate, Vecna studied in secret. Each night after midnight, he would steal into his master's library, teaching himself from their grimoires and treatises. What his mother had begun, he would complete through his own efforts and stolen knowledge. Some accounts speak of a voice that came to him during these secret study sessions, a whisper from another world, promising him revenge if he would only embrace the hatred festering in his heart. Whether this voice was real or a manifestation of his own darkness remained debated by scholars. What matters is that Vecna listened. The few who knew the young Vecna spoke of his eyes, cold, calculating, seeing through flesh to the weakness beneath. One childhood contemporary whose account survived in fragmentary form wrote, "He looks at you as though you were a book to be read, a puzzle to be solved. There was no warmth in him, no joy, only hunger, always hunger." He learned early that knowledge is power, but more importantly that secret knowledge is the greatest power of all. fact known by everyone is merely information. A fact known by only one person? That's leverage, control, survival. Young Vecna collected secrets like other children collected stones, hoarding each one jealously, understanding instinctively that the moment a secret is shared, its power diminishes. Vecna's magical abilities grew rapidly, fed by obsessive study and ruthless ambition. He mastered necromancy first, the school of magic that deals with death, undeath, and the forces that bind souls to flesh. While other mages saw necromancy as a dark art to be avoided or studied cautiously, Vecna saw it as the key to everything. Death was the ultimate limitation, and he would make it his servant rather than his master. His early experiments were small-scale but revealing of his nature. A rival who insulted him was found dead, then seen walking the streets the next night, eyes empty, serving Vecna mindlessly. A merchant who refused him credit discovered his entire family animated as corpses, forced to watch their own funeral. Vecna didn't just punish, he made examples, turning defiance into horror stories that spread faster than any army could march. But Vecna was not content with mere magical prowess. He understood that true power required multiple foundations: political authority, military might, economic control, and theological influence. Magic alone could win battles, but it took something more to build an empire that would endure. He began gathering followers with calculated precision. First came the desperate, those with nothing to lose who would serve anyone promising power. Then the ambitious, those who saw in Vecna a path to greatness that could never achieve alone. Finally, the ideological, those who genuinely believed that strength should rule, that the weak deserved subjugation, that Vecna's vision of perfect order through absolute control was not tyranny but salvation. A former general in Vecna's army who later defected and wrote his memoirs before being hunted down described the experience. Serving Vecna was like serving an idea made flesh. He didn't inspire loyalty, he inspired certainty. Certainty that he would win. Certainty that opposition was futile. Certainty that history itself bent to accommodate his will. Men followed him not for love, but for the simple recognition that he was inevitable. Through a combination of magical might, strategic brilliance, political manipulation, and utter ruthlessness, Vecna conquered vast territories. He established an empire built on a foundation of corpses, both literal and metaphorical. His methods were diverse and terrifying in their creativity. Cities that surrendered immediately were allowed to continue existing under Vecna's rule, their leadership replaced, but their populations largely intact. Cities that resisted briefly found their leaders executed publicly, their bodies animated to proclaim Vecna's mercy to any who would submit. Cities that resisted to the end were obliterated utterly, every citizen killed, then raised as undead soldiers, their city burned to ash, and the very ground salted so nothing would grow there again. Within a generation, stories of these places were dismissed as legends. Vecna had erased them so completely that even their destruction became uncertain. The empire spread like a disease. Each conquest made the next easier as word spread of the futility of resistance. Nations that might have allied against him found themselves isolated, surrounded, their potential partners already fallen. One by one, kingdoms bent the knee or ceased to exist. At the height of his mortal reign, Vecna ruled a domain of unprecedented size and horrifying efficiency. His armies were tireless undead who never questioned orders, never fled in fear, never required food or rest or payment. They could march for months without stopping, fight for days without tiring, and when destroyed, could be raised again if sufficient remains existed. His administrators were living beings selected for competence rather than loyalty. Vecna understood that skill mattered more than devotion when the penalty for failure was eternal undeath. They managed his empire with mechanical efficiency, knowing that success might earn them rewards, while failure earned them transformation into something that could no longer fail because it could no longer think. But the empire's true foundation was information. Vecna built a network of spies, informants, and magical surveillance that penetrated every corner of his domain. He knew which nobles plotted against him before they spoke the words aloud. He knew which generals harbored ambitions before those ambitions fully formed. He knew secrets that people had forgotten about themselves. This intelligence apparatus served dual purposes. It prevented rebellion through the certainty of discovery, and it provided Vecna with leverage over anyone he needed to control. A whispered threat. "I know what you did in Q-Land 20 years ago," was often sufficient to ensure cooperation. And if someone proved immune to blackmail, Vecna knew their weaknesses, their loved ones, their fears, and precisely how to exploit each one. But Vecna, at the apex of his earthly power, faced the one enemy that had defeated every conqueror before him: mortality. He could reshape kingdoms, command armies of the dead, bend reality itself through arcane power, but he could not escape the simple biological fact that his body was aging. Time, the most patient of assassins, was coming for him as it came for everyone. This was unacceptable. Vecna turned his formidable intellect towards solving this final problem with the same obsessive focus he'd applied to every obstacle in his path. If death could not be avoided, then death itself would become merely another servant, another tool, another form of existence to be mastered and exploited. He studied ancient texts rescued from burning libraries, stolen from rival mages' towers, excavated from tombs that should have remained sealed. He pored over accounts of those who had attempted to cheat death. Most had failed spectacularly, becoming twisted abominations or simply ceasing to exist. But a very few, had succeeded in becoming liches, undead sorcerers sustained by magic and will alone. His experiments were methodical and merciless. Prisoners were subjected to proto-lichdom rituals, their agonized deaths and horrific transformations carefully documented. Captured mages were forced to attempt the process while Vecna observed, noting what worked and what resulted in obliteration. His tower became a charnel house of failed immortality, each corpse a data point, each screaming subject a step closer to his goal. One of his apprentices, who survived to chronicle these years before mysteriously disappearing, recorded in trembling script, "The Master's laboratory has become a place where death is not an ending but an experiment. I've seen things shatter this boundary between life and unlife. I have witnessed transformations that make death seem merciful by comparison. And through it all, the Master takes notes, adjusts variables, and plans his own ascension with the calm detachment of a scholar solving an arithmetic problem. I fear I know too much. I fear I will be next." He made pacts with entities that existed at the boundaries of death, creatures from the negative energy plane, psychopomps who guided souls to the final rest. Legend speaks of tutors who may have guided him. Some texts name Moxlick, the serpent, believed to be the personification of arcane magic itself. Others claim Orcus, the demon prince of undeath, taught him the final secrets of lichdom. Still others insist Vecna discovered these truths entirely on his own, needing no teacher for what his genius could unlock. The truth of this tutelage may never be known, and perhaps that's fitting for one who would become the god of secrets. What matters is that he found the knowledge regardless of its source. Each entity he contacted provided a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the forbidden lore he required. He delved into magics so fundamentally wrong that merely comprehending them could shatter sanity. There are grimoires that should not be read, formulae that should not be spoken, truths about the nature of soul and flesh that the universe itself seems designed to conceal. Vecna found them all, understood them all, and mastered them all. And finally, after decades of research, after thousands of deaths in pursuit of knowledge, after sacrificing any lingering shred of humanity, he discovered the complete secret of lichdom, the ritual, the process, the transformation that would make him eternal. The process of becoming a lich is one of the most horrific rituals in all of magic, a perversion of life so profound that reality itself recoils from it. It requires first the creation of a phylactery, a receptacle for one's soul, crafted through dark magic and bound with rituals of such evil that performing them leaves scars on the world itself. The ritual demands blood sacrifice, not just any death, but the murder of someone connected to the caster, someone they cared for or who cared for them. This emotional connection fuels the dark magic, and the betrayal inherent in the act severs the caster's remaining ties to humanity. Some scholars believe this is why liches are so universally evil. The very process of becoming one requires an act so fundamentally wicked that only those already corrupted beyond redemption would attempt it. Then comes the poison, a concoction so deadly it would kill a dragon instantly, so toxic that merely touching it can cause necrosis. The would-be lich must consume it willingly, feeling their organs shut down, their blood turn to ice, their hearts stutter and stop. They must die completely and absolutely, crossing the threshold into true death. But the ritual prevents their soul from departing. Instead, it's torn back from whatever lies beyond, forced into a phylactery and then recalled to reanimate the dead body through pure necromantic will. What rises is no longer alive. It is undead, a corpse animated by magic and consciousness, sustained by stolen life energy rather than biological processes. Vecna performed this ritual without hesitation. Morality had long since ceased to constrain him, if it ever had. He killed what needed to be killed. The identity of his victim is lost to history. Some claim it was his last surviving relative, others his most loyal servant. A few dark texts even suggest possibilities too horrible to speak. The truth died with them, as Vecna intended. The only certainty is that someone who trusted him, or whom he had emotional connection to, paid the ultimate price for his immortality. He drank the poison, feeling his body betray him, organs failing in cascading collapse. He spoke the words of the ritual even as his voice failed, even as darkness closed around his vision, and he died. For a moment, or an eternity, for time has no meaning in that space between, there was nothing. Void, absence, the cold certainty of ending. But then he rose again. His eyes opened, but they no longer saw as living eyes see. His lungs drew breath, but only from habit, for he no longer required air. His heart remained still and silent in his chest, for he no longer required it. Vecna, the man, had died. Vecna, the Archlich, had been born, and the world would never be the same. As a Lich, Vecna gained what he most desired, time. Infinite time to study, to experiment, to accumulate knowledge and power. While mortal wizards hurried to accomplish their goals before death claimed them, Vecna could work on projects spanning centuries. While kingdoms rose and fell, he endured. But lichdom came with costs beyond the obvious loss of humanity. A lich's body slowly decays, flesh rotting away to leave animated bones held together by magical will. The phylactery must be periodically fed with souls, innocent souls, the more pure the better, to maintain the lich's existence. And there is the gradual erosion of anything resembling conscience or empathy, as the undead state strips away the emotions that made one human. Vecna didn't see these as costs. He saw them as acceptable sacrifices for ultimate power. With immortality achieved, Vecna's empire expanded even further. No longer constrained by mortal lifespan, he could plan campaigns lasting decades, manipulate politics across generations, and outlast any opposition simply by existing longer than his enemies. His court became a nightmare place. Living servants who proved their worth might be granted dark gifts, extended life, magical power, knowledge beyond mortal ken. Those who failed were transformed into undead, their souls bound to eternal service. The most loyal were sometimes offered lichdom themselves, creating a hierarchy of undead nobility serving the undying king. Vecna's appetite for secrets grew with his power. He collected knowledge like a dragon collects gold, hoarding it jealously and using it ruthlessly. He knew the true names of demons and angels. He possessed spell formulas that had been lost for millennia. He understood the weakness of gods and the secrets that could destroy nations. It's said that Vecna never wrote anything down unnecessarily. Every secret committed to paper was a potential weakness, a liability. He kept the most dangerous knowledge in his own mind alone, trusting no one with his most precious possessions. Even a being as paranoid and self-sufficient as Vecna was, he needed servants. Undead are loyal but lack initiative. Cultists are useful but limited by mortal frailty and inevitable stupidity. What Vecna required was something rare, a mortal competent enough to be valuable, ambitious enough to be motivated, but controlled enough to remain useful rather than becoming a threat. He found this in Cass. Cass the Bloody-Handed began as a common soldier, talented with blade, yes, but unremarkable in a world filled with warriors. What distinguished him was not his skill, but his hunger. He craved glory, recognition, immortality through legend. He wanted to be remembered when empires had fallen to dust. Vecna recognized this hunger and cultivated it carefully. He elevated Cass above his peers, gave him command of armies, allowed him victories that spread his fame. Where other generals died in Vecna's service, either through failure or success followed by termination, Cass survived and prospered, not through luck, but because Vecna found him useful. And useful he was. Cass proved to be a tactical genius, a warrior of legendary skill who turned Vecna's undead armies from a shambling horde into a precision instrument of conquest. He understood how to deploy tireless undead troops in ways that living generals couldn't conceive. He knew how to exploit their fearlessness, their perfect obedience, their ability to fight without rest or supply lines. Under Cass's command, Vecna's empire expanded faster than ever before. Nations fell like dominoes. Fortress cities that should have withstood year-long sieges crumbled in weeks. Cass's reputation grew until enemy soldiers would flee at the mere rumor of his approach, knowing that the bloody-handed general never lost, never retreated, and never showed mercy. Over decades, then centuries, as Vecna extended Cass's life through dark magic, a strange relationship developed between the Arch-Lich and his general. Sources disagree on when exactly Cass became a vampire. Some claim Vecna transformed him early in their partnership to make him more formidable. Others insist he became undead later through exposure to negative energy. Still others suggest the sword of Cass itself granted him this dark gift. Regardless of when the transformation occurred, Cass became something more than human, a vampire warrior of legendary skill. To call the relationship between them friendship would be inaccurate. Vecna was incapable of true friendship, but it was perhaps as close as either of them could come. Cass was permitted to speak freely in Vecna's presence, to offer counsel, to question decisions. This alone set him apart from every other living being in the Empire, all of whom spoke to Vecna in tones of abject terror or hollow flattery. A court historian writing in code that was only deciphered centuries later recorded, "The master and his general, they are like two scorpions circling in a bottle. Each respects the other's venom. Each recognizes in the other a kindred will. Yet both knows that eventually one must strike. The only question is which and when." In recognition of Cass's centuries of service, and perhaps in a moment of something almost like sentiment, Vecna crafted for his general a weapon worthy of his legend. The Sword of Cass took years to forge, drawing on lore from a dozen different planes, binding into it powers that would make its wielder nearly unstoppable. The sword was a masterwork, a blade of black metal that seemed to drink in light, etched with runes that hurt to look at directly. It possessed vampiric properties, draining life force from those it struck and channeling that energy to its wielder. It could cut through magical protections as easily as flesh. It made Cass, already formidable, into something approaching a demigod of war. But Vecna, in his arrogance, or perhaps in a moment of uncharacteristic carelessness, made a critical error. The sword was not merely powerful, it was intelligent, sentient, self-aware, and possessed of its own ambitions. The Sword of Cass whispered, not with sound, but directly into its wielder's mind. At first, the whispers were subtle, suggestions, observations, idle thoughts that seemed to be Cass's own. You lead the armies, yet he takes the glory. You win the battles, yet he reaps the power. You are the hand, but you could be the mind. Over years, the whispers grew bolder. Over decades, they became a constant presence. The sword was patient. It had eternity, after all, and it fed Cass's ambition like stoking a fire, carefully, gradually, until it burned hot enough to consume everything. The sword made Cass believe he deserved to rule, that Vecna, for all his power, had grown complacent, that a general who had won 1,000 battles was more qualified to lead than a scholar who merely commanded from his tower, that the empire would be better served by a warrior king than an undead tyrant. And finally, inevitably, the whisper said, "Strike now. Kill him while he studies his dusty tomes. Take what should be yours. Become what you were meant to be." The moment came during a private audience in Vecna's innermost sanctum. Cass entered ostensibly to deliver a battle report. No guards were present. Vecna needed none, or so he believed. It was just the Archlich and his general, master and servant, separated by a few feet of ancient stone floor. Cass drew his sword. The battle that followed was apocalyptic. Master and servant, Archlich and warrior champion, immortal sorcerer and legendary general. They fought with powers that made the fortress itself scream. Stone cracked, reality bent. The boundaries between planes grew thin as their clash tore at the fabric of existence. Cass struck with the fury of centuries of suppressed ambition, the sword singing as it cut through Vecna's magical defenses. Vecna retaliated with spells that had destroyed kingdoms, magic that rewrote reality at a fundamental level. Neither would yield. Neither could afford to. The critical moment came when Cass's blade found its mark. The sword, guided by its own malevolent intelligence and Cass's skill, struck Vecna's left hand, severing it cleanly at the wrist. In the same motion, the blade's return stroke gouged Vecna's left eye from its socket. For the first time in centuries, Vecna knew pain. Not the dull ache of aging flesh or the minor inconvenience of a wound that would heal, but genuine, shocking, real pain. His scream shattered windows throughout the fortress. And Vecna, in that moment of pure rage and betrayal, unleashed magic that should not exist. The specific spell is lost to history, perhaps deliberately, perhaps simply because no one who witnessed it survived to record it. What is known is that it destroyed Cass utterly, vaporizing his body, obliterating his soul, erasing him so completely that even death could not claim him. Or so it seemed. The resulting magical explosion, two immense powers detonating simultaneously, obliterated Vecna's fortress down to its foundations. Some texts call it the Rotting Tower, others simply his citadel. But regardless of its name, the structure was destroyed utterly. The shockwave destroyed everything within miles. His empire, built over centuries, crumbled in moments as his undead armies collapsed without his will to animate them. His cultists scattered to the winds, taking what lore they could salvage. His administrators fled or died. In a single catastrophic moment, Vecna's empire, which had seemed eternal and unstoppable, simply ceased to exist. Both combatants appeared to have been destroyed. Cass was gone, leaving behind only his cursed sword. Vecna's body was nowhere to be found, consumed in the conflagration or blasted to atoms by his own magic. The world celebrated the death of its greatest tyrant. Songs were sung, holidays declared. Children were told that evil, no matter how powerful, could not triumph forever. But they were wrong, because appearances, where Vecna is concerned, are always deceiving. His hand and eye remained, animated by his will, containing fragments of his power. His phylactery endured, hidden in a place known only to him, and most importantly, his consciousness persisted, diminished, dispersed, but undefeated. Vecna had not been destroyed. He had merely been inconvenienced. An immortal being can afford to be patient about inconveniences. He would return. It was only a question of when. Vecna's severed hand and eye did not decay as mortal flesh should. They did not rot, did not wither to bone, did not crumble to dust. Instead, they remained perfectly preserved, or perhaps preserved is the wrong word. They remained animate, sustained by the same necromantic energies that had sustained Vecna's lichdom. still containing fragments of his terrible will and power. They became perhaps the most infamous artifacts in all of Dungeons & Dragons, objects so dangerous, so corrupting, so fundamentally wrong that merely possessing them is considered an act of evil. Yet their power is such that throughout history there have always been those willing to pay the price. An elven sage who studied the artifacts from a very safe distance wrote, "They are not merely relics of Vecna, they are Vecna, in a sense fragments of his essence given terrible form. To use them is to invite him into your very being, and once invited, he never truly leaves." The eye of Vecna appears as a preserved eyeball of sickly gray-green. The iris is a color that doesn't quite exist in nature. Looking at it too long causes discomfort. Not physical pain, but a wrongness that makes the observer's own eyes water. Some claim the eye moves occasionally when not being watched, its pupil tracking unseen targets. To use the eye, one must first remove their own left eye, a process that is every bit as horrible as it sounds. Then the eye of Vecna must be pressed into the empty socket. What happens next is described in one survivor's account. "The pain was beyond description. The eye pushed itself deeper into my skull, tendrils of something that was neither flesh nor magic burrowing into my brain. I felt it connecting to my optic nerve, to parts of my mind that should not be touched, and then I could see. Gods, how I could see. Every illusion became transparent. Every invisibility spell revealed. Every hidden door exposed. But I also saw things I should not see. The futures that might be, the past that were, the spaces between spaces. And in all of it, I felt his presence. Vecna, watching through me, whispering secrets I did not want to know." The eye grants incredible powers of perception, true sight that penetrates all deceptions, the ability to see through solid matter as if it were glass, vision into other planes of existence, witnessing realms that mortal minds were never meant to comprehend. Some users report being able to see magic itself, the very fabric of arcane energy that underlies reality. But these powers come at terrible cost. The eye begins corrupting its user immediately, subtly at first, then progressively. Users become paranoid, seeing threats everywhere because they literally see everything. They grow obsessed with secrets, with hidden knowledge, with discovering what others want concealed. Their personality shifts towards Vecna's own, cold, calculating, viewing other beings as resources to be exploited, rather than people to be valued. And the whispers. Users consistently report hearing whispers in their mind. Vecna's voice, offering guidance, sharing secrets, slowly molding them into something more useful to his purposes. "I know where the treasure is. I know who betrayed you. I know how to achieve your desires. Just listen. Just trust. Just obey." The hand of Vecna is even more immediately dangerous. It appears as a mummified left hand, gnarled with age, skin like dried leather stretched over ancient bone. The fingernails are broken and yellowed. The flesh has a faint sheen as if coated in something unpleasant. And like the eye, it radiates wrongness, a palpable sense that this object should not exist. To use the hand requires severing one's own left hand at the wrist. Most users require assistance for this mutilation, as the dominant hand typically lacks the strength and control to perform such surgery on itself. Once removed, Vecna's hand must be pressed into the stump while specific words are spoken. Words in a language that predates Elven, that taste of rot and ancient evil when pronounced. The hand attaches itself in moments. Blood vessels connect, though no blood flows. Nerves splice together, transmitting sensation, though the hand has been dead for millennia. Bone fuses with bone, and suddenly the user has a new hand. Old, withered, alien, but functional. More than functional. Powerful. The powers are immediate and dramatic. Superhuman strength concentrated in the grafted hand. Users report being able to crush stone, bend iron bars, strangle creatures that should be far too strong to overcome. the ability to cast devastating spells with a simple gesture, bypassing normal components and casting times. Death magic at a touch, killing weaker creatures instantly and draining life force from stronger ones. A necromancer who briefly possessed the hand before it consumed him managed to write, "The hand does not feel like my own. It moves according to my will, yes, but also according to his will. Sometimes I find it moving when I did not command it, reaching for things I did not consciously desire, making gestures I do not recognize. It is growing stronger, or perhaps I am growing weaker. I fear the day when I can no longer tell where I end and it begins." The corruption is severe and immediate. Users become cruel without realizing it, their capacity for empathy eroding day by day. Ambition swells until it becomes all-consuming. They find themselves willing to sacrifice anything, friends, morals, their own humanity, for power. Many scholars believe this is not merely corruption, but transformation. The hand gradually reshaping its user into something more like Vecna himself. Most terrifying of all is what happens when both artifacts are united in a single individual. Historical records of such unions are fragmentary. Most who achieved this did not survive long enough to document it, and those who did survive often destroyed their own writings afterward, as if the knowledge itself was too dangerous to preserve. But the pattern is clear. When hand and eye comes together, their power doesn't add, it multiplies. The user becomes something approaching godlike, possessed of Vecna's knowledge, his magical prowess, his ruthless will. They can see the truth of everything while wielding death itself as a weapon. Reality bends around them. Lesser beings cannot meet their gaze without flinching. Their very presence causes the natural world to recoil. But they also become something more or something less, depending on perspective. They become a vessel, a doorway, a connection point through which Vecna can reach back into the world. Personalities merge, identities blur, and eventually the question becomes impossible to answer. Is this still the original user wearing Vecna's artifacts, or is this Vecna himself wearing the user's body like a glove? The artifacts cannot be destroyed by normal means. Attempts to break, burn, dissolve, or disintegrate them have all failed. They resist being buried, locked away, or hidden, somehow finding their way back into circulation, into the hands of those ambitious or foolish enough to use them. Some suspect Vecna himself guides them, his will reaching across vast distances to ensure his tools remain in play. Throughout history, hundreds have used the hand or eye, some for mere days before the corruption overwhelmed them, others for years, slowly transforming into something unrecognizable, a few for decades, becoming legends of evil in their own right. Every single one met a dark end. There are no stories of someone using Vecna's artifacts and then retiring peacefully. The artifacts demand too much, corrupt too deeply, attract too much attention from those who would seize such power for themselves. Yet still, in every generation, someone discovers them. Someone thinks they'll be different, stronger, capable of wielding such power without succumbing to its corruption. Someone believes they can control Vecna's essence rather than being controlled by it. They are always wrong. In the centuries following Vecna's apparent destruction, the hand and eye passed through countless owners. Some sought them deliberately, drawn by legends of their power. Others stumbled upon them by accident, or were led to them by Vecna's surviving cultists, who never stopped serving their master despite his physical absence. Every user met a similar fate: corruption, madness, and eventual death, or transformation into something no longer recognizably human. The artifacts could not be destroyed by conventional means. Meanwhile, cults dedicated to Vecna continued operating in secret. They collected his lore, performed dark rituals in his name, and worked tirelessly toward a single goal: the return of their master. Vecna had not been destroyed. His phylactery, hidden in a location known only to him, had survived. And as long as the phylactery endured, so too did Vecna, in a sense. His consciousness lingered between life and death, between existence and void, slowly gathering power, slowly rebuilding. Through his artifacts and his cults, through whispers in the night and corrupted dreams, Vecna influenced the world. He gathered worshippers, he accumulated power, and eventually, impossibly, he returned. But he returned changed. The battle with caste, the centuries of existence as dispersed consciousness, the worship of countless cultists, all of this had transformed Vecna from mere archlich into something greater. He had achieved what few beings ever accomplish. He had become a demigod. Not through divine ascension or blessing from greater powers, but through pure will and accumulated power. Vecna had stolen divinity, claimed it through force of personality and necromantic might. He became the god of secrets, of liches, of evil knowledge, and hidden truths. Vecna's return was chronicled in one of D&D's most famous adventures, Vecna Lives, published in 1990 for Advanced D&D 2nd Edition. This adventure was notorious for being brutally difficult. The first encounter was designed to kill player characters to emphasize the severity of the threat. The premise was simple but apocalyptic. Vecna had returned and plans to achieve full godhood. If he succeeds, his control over secrets will allow him to rewrite reality itself, erasing his enemies from history and establishing himself as a supreme deity. This adventure established Vecna as more than just another lich or villain. It positioned him as a threat to existence itself. The stakes weren't just the fate of a city or kingdom, they were the fate of reality. The culmination of Vecna's story came in 2000 with Die Vecna Die, an adventure that served as a transition between Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition and D&D 3rd Edition. In this reality-bending saga, Vecna attempts to remake the multiverse itself. The adventure takes place across multiple planes, involves gods directly opposing Vecna, and culminates in a confrontation that literally reshapes the fundamental rules of reality. When Vecna is finally defeated, the resulting magical backlash is so powerful it alters the structure of magic itself, explaining in-game why the rules changed between editions. But even this defeat wasn't permanent. Vecna is too powerful, too ancient, too fundamentally woven into the fabric of D&D to ever truly die. He retreats, he plans, he waits. Because time means nothing to him, and he will always have another opportunity. As a god, even a lesser god, Vecna commands domains that reflect his nature. Secrets. Vecna is the god of hidden knowledge of things meant to remain unknown. He rewards those who uncover secrets and punish those who reveal them carelessly. Scholars who discover forbidden lore, spies who steal vital intelligence, and cultists who keep dark truths hidden all inadvertently serve Vecna's purposes. Undeath. He remains the patron of liches and other undead who seek to transcend mortality through magic. Necromancers pray to him for knowledge of the darkest rituals. Those seeking lichdom invoke his name in their transformations. Evil knowledge. Vecna hoards dangerous information, spell formulas that could destroy cities, true names that grant power over demons, secrets that could topple kingdoms. He trades in what should remain unknown, offering power to those willing to pay his price. Betrayal. Having been betrayed by caste, Vecna now claims betrayal as part of his domain. He understands the power of turning ally against ally, of corrupting loyalty, of making trust a weapon. Vecna's cults operate in absolute secrecy, which is appropriate for a god of secrets. They exist in every major city, hidden within legitimate organizations, masquerading as scholars' guilds or historical societies. Members might not even know they're part of Vecna's cult. Information is compartmentalized, with each level knowing only what they need to know. Vecna's clergy are diverse. The keepers of secrets gather and protect forbidden knowledge. The whisperers spread false information and manipulate through lies. The Hand of Vecna, assassins who eliminate those who know too much. The Watchers, spies embedded in positions of power. Vecna rarely manifests directly to his followers. Instead, he communicates through whispers in the dark, through dreams and visions, through coded messages hidden in ancient texts. His presence is felt as a cold certainty, a sudden understanding of dark truths, a whispered revelation that changes everything. Vecna has appeared or been referenced in numerous D&D products across editions. 3rd edition features him in the epic level handbook as one of the most powerful beings players could face. 4th edition's Open Grave, Secrets of the Undead detailed his role as patron of liches. 5th edition has referenced him multiple times, with his artifacts appearing in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Most recently, Vecna, Eve of Ruin, 2024, brought him back as the central villain of a multiverse-spanning campaign. In 2022, Vecna made an unexpected appearance in mainstream culture as the primary antagonist of Stranger Things Season 4. For millions of viewers who had never rolled a 20-sided die, this was their introduction to one of D&D's most iconic villains. But the Stranger Things version of Vecna is dramatically different from his D&D counterpart, both in concept and execution. In Stranger Things, Vecna is actually Henry Creel, or One, a powerful psychic being trapped in the Upside Down. His appearance, twisted, burned, with his hand and face corrupted, is a visual reference to D&D's Vecna, and his missing hand and eye. He targets teenagers with trauma, invading their minds and killing them through psychic torture. The show's Vecna is a psychic entity rather than an undead sorcerer, motivated by nihilism and hatred of humanity. Physically present in the Upside Down dimension, vulnerable to music and emotional connection, named after the D&D villain by the characters themselves. By contrast, D&D's Vecna is an undead lich who became a god through necromancy, motivated by insatiable hunger for secrets and power, ancient beyond measure with empires rising and falling during his existence, nearly impossible to permanently destroy. A master manipulator who works through cults and artifacts rather than direct confrontation. While the Stranger Things version is vastly different from the source material, the reference itself is valuable. It introduced millions of people to D&D lore, sparked interest in the game, and demonstrated how D&D's mythology has become part of broader pop culture. For longtime D&D players, the show's use of Vecna was a moment of recognition and validation, seeing a villain from their hobby acknowledged in mainstream media. For new players drawn to D&D through Stranger Things, discovering the real Vecna is a revelation. The show's version is terrifying. The D&D original is so much worse. Using Vecna in your campaign. Vecna works best as a long-term background threat rather than an immediate combat encounter. His power level makes him nearly unbeatable in direct confrontation, especially for mid-level parties. Instead, consider these approaches. The Cult Arc. Start with his cultists as enemies. The party gradually uncovers that they're all working for someone greater, building towards the revelation that Vecna is behind everything. The Artifact Hunt. The eye or hand appears, corrupting someone the party knows. They must track down the artifact and decide how to deal with it. Destroy it, hide it, or use it against Vecna himself. The Secret Keeper. Vecna possesses information the party desperately needs. They must find a way to bargain with a god of secrets who always demands terrible prices for knowledge. The Proxy War. The party never faces Vecna directly, but fights his agents, disrupts his plans, and opposes his schemes across multiple adventures, building towards a climactic confrontation. A Vecna campaign should emphasize paranoia. Who can be trusted? What information is true? Are they being manipulated? The cost of knowledge. Discovering dangerous secrets that change everything. Corruption. The temptation of power through Vecna's artifacts or secrets. Ancient evil. A threat that has endured for millennia and will outlast any opposition. Vecna's stat block varies by edition, but he's consistently one of the most powerful entities in D&D. In 5th edition, his statistics suggest a CR of 26+, making him suitable only for parties level 17 or higher. Even then, direct combat should be a last resort. For lower level campaigns, focus on his influence rather than his presence. His cults, his artifacts, his schemes. These can threaten parties of any level without requiring them to face a god in combat. In nearly 5 decades of Dungeons & Dragons, thousands of villains have been created. Dragons have been slain, demons banished, tyrants overthrown. Most fade from memory, replaced by newer threats and fresher campaigns. But Vecna endures. His name appears in every edition. His artifacts corrupt new generations of adventurers. His cults operate in every campaign setting. He transcends any single adventure or story arc to become something fundamental to D&D itself. A touchstone of ultimate evil, a benchmark against which all other villains are measured. What makes Vecna special isn't just his power, though that is considerable. What makes him unique is his nature as the god of secrets, in a game built around discovering the unknown, exploring the mysterious, and uncovering hidden truths. Vecna represents the dark side of that curiosity. He's the price of knowledge, the danger of ambition, the corruption that comes from seeking power at any cost. He began as a man seeking to escape death. He became a lich to achieve immortality. He rose to godhood through sheer will and accumulated power. And he represents a terrifying question. What happens when someone pursues power without limit, knowledge without ethics, immortality without humanity? The answer is Vecna, the Whispered One, the Undying King, the master of all secrets, the arch-lich who became a god and decided even godhood wasn't enough. So when you sit down at your gaming table, when you roll the dice and tell stories, when you delve into dungeons and face terrible threats, remember this: somewhere in the shadows, Vecna is watching. He knows your secrets. He sees your weaknesses. He is patient, eternal, inevitable, and he is waiting. In the end, all secrets come to me. All knowledge flows to me. All power serves me. I am what lies beneath mortality, beyond death, behind the veil of reality itself. I am eternal. I am inevitable. I am Vecna. The final words of the Whispered One.